So if you remember back to sort of the autumn of last year, you remember I'd started doing a series on Romans 12 and calling it When in Rome. And it's the little part of Romans 12 where Paul is getting very practical. He's done a lot of theology in the first 11 or so chapters. And he just has these very practical things which he says to the church there. And I'm fleshing out those in this series. This morning I'm going to think about help and hospitality. Okay, 2 H's. And this is a letter that Paul wrote very unusually to a church he'd never visited, didn't plant, but only heard about. We don't know quite how it first came about, this church right in the centre of life and culture in the city of Rome. He wants to go there. He says in the letter that I'm looking forward to visiting you if God lets me. And in the meantime, he's giving them this great theology. He's not really answering any particular questions, as he does in many of his other letters for the churches he planted. There's always stuff going on, problems and stuff, which he addresses in his letters. He's not really addressing any problems. He's just fleshing out the theology of the kingdom. And then he gets very practical in how we should live as people in the kingdom. So he's writing this letter to this kind of little kingdom outpost in the centre of Rome. And the centre of power and culture, and yet he's wanting to bring in a whole new culture and a new power, the power and culture of the kingdom. So let me just remind you where we got to. He said, we covered this, the first 9 to 12 so far. Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, and cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honour one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervour serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need, and practice hospitality. If you want to catch up with any of those that you've missed, they are all on our YouTube site. Technology, hey. So if you just go onto YouTube and Google Worcester Vineyard Church, then all the previous talks are there, and loads of others as well, if you really get bored. So we're going to think firstly about helping, about meeting need, is what Paul says. Share with God's people who are in need. First of all, I found that interesting when I was thinking about it, is why does he mention God's people in particular? Is that a get-out, that if, we don't have to help non-Christians? Wonderful. Of course, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. But I think Paul was particularly keen that the church in Rome, and any church, as he sees it, that, as I said, it's like an outpost of the kingdom of God. And he wants the church to be a place that is different to the world. Different in the sense that it's a picture of the coming kingdom. The coming kingdom when everything is perfect and beautiful, and the church will never be quite that. But it's meant to be something which shows a glimpse of that and is on the way to being that. And therefore, looking after, being family, as we said, honouring one another, looking after one another, is so basic to his kingdom vision for the church that we meet especially the needs of God's family. We obviously meet the needs of those others as well. We do Grow Baby and all lots of other things that you do personally, I'm sure, with people, your neighbours and so on. But he has this vision of the kingdom coming within the church, and we should be looking after those in need within the church. And just as an aside, that's very anti-prosperity gospel, isn't it, really? Paul doesn't say, if there's anyone in need in the church, tell them to have a bit more faith. No, he says, you look after them. He almost assumes that people will be in need from time to time in different ways. It's very anti-prosperity gospel. So there will be people in need in various different ways within the church. And he wants us to look after one another. We as a church, you're very good at it, but we can always be better. I know I can be better. And he talks about sharing, and sharing is a kingdom heart posture. That we want to give away what we have. I don't know whether that's your heart posture. And it's you know, I've often said that I'm a recovering self-aholic, and I am. You know, my natural instinct before I was a Christian was just to look after number one, be selfish, and I'm still on that journey of letting that go and allow God to heal me. So the kingdom heart posture is that we want to share, we want to give away of what we have, who we are, not, I mean, in our material ways, and we'll think about that a bit more when we think about hospitality, but also giving away of ourself. And that actually is something that we hold on to very often, that we're not prepared to share who we are, to share our giftings and to share our the things that God has put within us to bless other people with. Often, actually, just sharing is just being here, just turning up and being here amongst the family, because we're all encouraged. But I'm so encouraged this morning because there's so many of you here. So that's part of it. It's actually just sharing yourself, and not holding things back and keeping things back. You can tell whether you kind of got this heart posture when you get some chocolates or some goodies at Christmas, and you know they're kind of your favourite chocolates, and do you think, oh, I'll just hide those away? Or you know, when the family's there, do you think, no, I'll share them. I'll share them. Even if they take my favourite one, I'll share them. I'm sure you all do that. You know, you don't keep them back, do you? No. So you know, sharing is a kingdom heart posture, and that's what Paul urges us to do. He says, share with God's people who are in need. So meeting need, and that can be all sorts of things, actually. This probably isn't an exhaustive list, but sometimes it can be that somebody needs finance. You know, just we get to hear or know that somebody, or even we get to sense from God so often that he just puts somebody on our heart and says, I want you to give them some money or cash or whatever it is. And you know, in Paul's culture in his day, there was always bound to be somebody in the churches who were in need financially. So sometimes it is that God wants us to look after someone who's either just lost their job or going through a particularly tough patch financially, and God puts it on our hearts to share and to give them something to keep them going. Sometimes it's just a word of encouragement that we need. You know, we sense that somebody's not just struggling a bit or down or whatever, and sometimes it's just a word of encouragement that somebody needs. That's their need in that particular moment, and God wants us to be open to that, to be the ones. Don't leave it to just the pastors, because you know we're rubbish at it anyway. So you know, some people have a gift of encouragement, and it's using that gift to just say, I actually just want to encourage you to keep going, or whatever in whatever's happening. Sometimes it is prayer, of course. Sometimes there's nothing else we can do about a need but pray about it. And you're great at this. I mean, I'm not saying this because you're not good at it. And then the WhatsApp group is great. And so many people have said many times that it's just be able to share with that and know that somebody will pray, and know that you will pray. And that's a blessing. And we've all done that for each other, and we want to keep doing that. Don't be afraid to put something on there if you need prayer, because it makes a difference, as we've heard this week. And I know of other circumstances which I'm not at liberty to share, where we've just prayed and something's shifted. And I sense that I want to encourage you that I sense God's doing more of that. And so sometimes, yeah, all you can do is pray. There's nothing practical you can do, but sometimes just pray. Sometimes the need is just practical stuff, you know, when someone's ill, providing them with a meal, or lending your equipment to them to help them do their garden, or doing their garden, or helping with some decorating. There's loads and loads of ways in which needs can be just practical things, just giving us some time, or things that you've got that you can lend out, or whatever it might be. So be on the lookout for just those practical things that you can do to help someone who's in need in the church. Sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes just someone wants to unburden themselves, and it's knowing, particularly when that is the case, when it's just the time to listen and maybe not to speak very much, but just to listen. And it's just that sense of knowing that you're not on your own when you share something that's really, on your heart or you're struggling with. So be good listeners. Sometimes that's such a kingdom blessing. Sometimes we can help, of course, with advice or wisdom. When somebody's going through something, maybe you've been there and you've come out the other side of something, so you've got a bit of wisdom that you can share. That you can just say, look, this is what happened to me, and I did this, or you just got some skill in some area you can share. And again, I know many of you do this, and it's fantastic. Keep it up. Sometimes it's just loving and blessing. It's just an arm around somebody's shoulder, or just that sense to let you know that you're loved, that we love you as part of the family of God here. So look, there's loads of ways in which we can share ourselves, whether it's our stuff, our finances, who we are, in order to meet needs within the church. And I'm always amazed in the animal kingdom about how even small insects can detect things from so far away. I was watching something, I think it was probably Planet Earth 3, and they were in New York looking at some ants who live in the streets, and they sort of mop up all the stuff, fast food that gets dropped. But they can sense when something's out in the street from very far distance away. The antennae go up and they sense, Big Mac on the pavement, and they're off. We need to kind of develop that kind of spiritual antennae to need, and just to be open to sensing need. Sometimes we need spiritual antennae to sense need, because we don't always want to share. That's okay. But sometimes we just need that spiritual antenna, and to think, actually, it could be me that needs to meet that need, not somebody else, not thinking, somebody else will do it. It's sometimes you and I. I also want to say, just to encourage you, don't be embarrassed when you're in need. It's not a sense of weakness. It's just how life is sometimes, that we're in need. I said in churches there are two ways in which people approach need. There are some that like to be needy and almost create need, and we don't want to, and that's no one here, I'm sure. And the Bible's very realistic about this, actually. In Thessalonica, when Paul writes the second letter to Thessalonica, there were some people in the church that were refusing to work. And Paul's very practical. He says, we gave you this instruction. If you won't work, you won't eat. So he's basically saying, don't expect the church to pick this up. If you're just, not because you can't work, but you won't work, then don't expect the church to pick it up. It's your responsibility. So we are responsible for looking after our own needs where we can. But more often than not, actually, in the church, we're just embarrassed or slow to ask. Don't be. Don't be embarrassed or slow to ask when you're in need. It's not a reflection on you in any way. Anti-prosperity gospel and all that stuff again. So don't be slow. And lastly, just as I was thinking about this, just what holds us back from sharing when there are needs around? And I just thought of three. Firstly, fear. Sometimes we're just afraid, maybe that we'll get it wrong, or that we'll be rejected if we offer help, or that we won't pray in the right way, or whatever it might be. So we think, I can't do this, and I'm afraid, and so we don't. Let's just overcome that. Let's just go for it. Better to have too much help for somebody than none at all. Sometimes, in speaking personally, I'm just selfish sometimes, so I just refuse to help because my own selfishness. And lastly, I think hindrances to sharing can sometimes be our own need. So when we ourselves are in need, that can be so all-consuming that we don't see anything else. And when you're starting to really get to maturity in the faith, is when you're in need, but you still have the resources to help somebody else. And you don't stop helping because of your own need. I think Jesus, obviously, is the wonderful example of this. So often, you get those stories in the gospel where he's just burnt out and tired and really worn out, and loads of people turn up for healing and to be taught, and he just goes again. He doesn't say, "Oh, I haven't got it. I'm so sorry." He's just, even in his own need, he's always so other-centered that he can do that. Or just that time when he's being arrested. I mean, right at the end of his life. They come in the garden in the darkness with the torches to arrest him. And during the kerfuffle, Peter gets his sword out and cuts off the high priest's servant's ear. And Jesus, as we know, he's in this moment where he's desperate. He knows the cross is coming. He's desperate. But what does he do? He still reaches out and heals the guy. I mean, amazing miracle that his ear's back, Or even when he's actually on the cross. He's in the throes of dying with all that pain. And he reaches out to John, the disciple, and says, "Look after my mum when I'm gone." He's so other-centered that he can do that. And I want to get there. I'm not there. I want to get there. So sometimes it is just our own needs that stop us from having that radar for somebody else, or feeling we haven't got the resources. The resources of the kingdom are unlimited. And so even in our own need, we can find the resources to help others. Okay, so that's part one, sharing with God's people who are in need. And then he goes on to this just two-word command, practice hospitality. The great thing about doing this passage, actually, and just working through it systematically, is I can't escape any of it, really. And I'm a raving introvert, really. Even though I get up and do this sort of thing, I'm pretty much an introvert. So I'd much rather Paul had said something like, when you feel like it, just welcome people into your home occasionally, now and again. But it's not, it's a command, actually. It's a command. Practice hospitality. And the word practice is a very strong word, actually. It doesn't bring it out in the English so much, but it means pursue something. It comes from the Greek, in the Greek origin, to chase after something. It was often used as well for persecution. When Paul was persecuting the church before he became a Christian and was chasing all over the place, trying to lock people up and so on. That's the same Greek word. So practice is slightly weak, really, but it means go for it with all you have. So it reminds me that, as with everything else, I don't own anything, really. I'm just a steward of it all. And my home is to be used for the kingdom. And particularly for meals. I think this is just something which is kingdom orientated. This was Jesus' way. If you look at the Gospels, someone once said that he's either going to a meal, he's at a meal, or he's coming from a meal. That's just Jesus' way. He didn't have a home his own, but he seemed to commandeer everybody else's home and make it a place of kingdom work. He was accused of being a glutton and a drunkard by his enemies, because he was always in a party or in a food setting or something. And I've often wondered why. I mean, this is just me musing, but why did God make us so that we had to eat? We could have made us so we didn't need to do that, really. We could have just had everything sustained within us, and we, didn't need to bother with this pit stop every few minutes not every few minutes, but every, a few hours to eat. And for some of us, it might be every few minutes, but he's created it this way, and I think there's something very kingdom orientated about sharing meals and sharing food. There's something about sharing life around the table, breaking barriers, developing intimacy, deepening fellowship and building trust, which doesn't happen in any other way, almost, really. And I think it's a gift to us, and it's a gift we should start to use more and more. And particularly in the Greek, the hospitality word there means literally to welcome strangers, which is interesting, because that's what we should be. We should be people who welcome strangers. I think I've tried a definition, so forgotten to do this, but yeah. Okay, yeah. That's all the stuff I've just done. Welcome, strangers. So expressing the welcome of God to all through a tangible act of love and service, through giving food and relationship. There's a book which I haven't read, but I love the title of, so maybe I'll read it one day, called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And I think that's true, it does. And I need to be reminded of that sometimes, that one of the best ways, not just sharing hospitality amongst us, but one of the best ways to do kingdom outreach work is just inviting people, your neighbours, work colleagues, whoever, into your house and sharing a meal. And the opportunities that arise from that, it's partly about building relationship and trust, but stuff happens through it. A lot of commentators have said that the early church grew from one table to another. In other words, that was their main evangelistic tool. I mean, I know Paul used to do street stuff, and that's fine. But in the main, the gospel spread from one table to another. And sometimes we struggle with how can we do evangelism, and how can we do it well? How can we do it naturally? Here's a method: show hospitality to strangers. Now, you might feel that this isn't your thing. I don't know, but I'm just trying to encourage you. Really, it doesn't have to be. It's not the same as entertainment. Okay, it's not that you've got to give a lavish dinner party, or have gourmet cooking, or it's kind of have some great performance, or that it's kind of just entertainment tends to be exclusive, and we just invite our friends or the people we want to impress, or the people that might invite us back for a meal. It's none of that. We want it to be. I'm forgetting to click this now. You see, we want it to be inclusive, so inviting all sorts of people, not just those we naturally get on with. It's serving. It's about giving away of ourselves. Whether we ever get an invite back to there, it doesn't matter. We're just pursuing serving people. We want it to be rhythmic and not sporadic. In other words, it's something that we build into our culture and way we do things. Not just thinking, occasionally I'll invite somebody for a meal, but always thinking about, how can I do this? Or who can I invite? And it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be a lavish thing. It can be just soup and roll, or cheese and biscuits, or something. Something simple to share. If you're not a great cook, don't worry. I mean, apparently there are lots of ways of getting meals from out there as well. If you don't want to cook, just saying. And it doesn't matter if it goes wrong. I have to share this one story. When we were back in our early days of being Christians, we went to a friend of ours in the church for a meal. They invited us for a meal, and we thought, it's great. We got on well with them, and we had a good time. But she did lemon chicken, and I don't know how much lemon juice she put on this lemon chicken, but it was it was like trying to eat chicken that was pure, like lemon jif all over it. It was. You're kind of polite when yeah. But they started looking, even they did, and eventually, of course, it was inedible, to be honest. It really was. But we laughed about it, and actually, it became a shared experience. Even though it was a disaster in terms of the food, it was a shared experience, and so even if it goes wrong, don't worry. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So, I want to encourage you to practice hospitality. It's something that is a command to us. I can't avoid it, even though sometimes I want my home to be a castle and pull up the drawbridge. And maybe there are times when that's right. There are moments, but probably only occasionally, and it shouldn't be my heart posture. The kingdom posture is to open our homes up and to invite others to come and share, to provide for them. There's loads of neighbours round about you. You've all got neighbours, I'm sure. So there's neighbours, and as I said, there's work colleagues, there's people in the church. But let's just start doing it. Let's practice. And thank you, by the way, for all of those who do open up your homes in various ways, whether it's small groups or in other ways. Kingdom work. opening up your home, even if you're just providing coffee and biscuits and cake or whatever. It's still opening up your home. So thank you for doing it. I'm done, I think.